This is Metabolic Radio, the podcast dedicated to keeping you informed when it comes to everything fitness. My name is Taylor Empey, and with the help of my co-host Shane Pace, we aim to expose the truths about the health and fitness industry. The information and suggestions given in this podcast should not be considered as clinical or medical advice. Consult with a physician before implementing any information provided on this podcast. And now it's time for This Week in Health and Fitness. What's new and what's trending? Okay, so for This Week in Health and Fitness, this episode is going to air on May 23rd, 2016. Big news, actually, this last week. The FDA announced that new nutrition facts labels are going to be implemented, and they're making a lot of major changes. I'm actually really happy to see this kind of change happening because I think there's a lot of problems with the way our food is labeled, and I think it's a good idea to give consumers better education and better resources to understand what they're putting into their body. So I think this is a big step forward. There's obviously some more things that I would like to see changed, but with nutrition policy, obviously that's something that's going to take years, and it's actually going to take a couple years for this to be fully implemented. But pretty much, the FDA recently finalized the new nutrition facts labels for packaged foods to reflect new scientific information, including the link between diet and chronic diseases such as obesity and heart disease. The new label will make it easier for consumers to make better, more informed food choices. The new label features a refreshed design, reflects updated information about nutrition science, and updates serving sizes and labeling requirements for certain package sizes. Most food manufacturers will be required to use the new label by July 26, 2018. So that's where I'm talking about. It's nice that we're seeing some change, but it's still going to be 2 years before you see this fully implemented in all foods. But that's because we have so many tens of thousands, if not millions of foods in circulation that are going to have to be relabeled and repackaged. Some of the highlights of this change, so you can get a better idea of what they're actually changing on the labels. First thing that they cover is features on the refreshed design. So they're stating that the iconic look for the label remains, but we are making important updates to ensure consumers have access to the information they need to make more informed decisions about the foods they eat. These changes include increasing the type size for calories, or the font, servings per container, and the serving size declaration, and bolding the number of these calories and the serving size declarations to highlight this information. And looking at the nutrition label, it's dramatically different. Those things that they've identified definitely stand out a lot further, or a lot better, so that you can just kind of be made aware of what you're actually consuming in terms of its caloric amount and some other serving size aspects of what serving sizes you're consuming. And so that's just going to help people make better, more health conscious decisions. Manufacturers must declare the actual amount in addition to the percent of daily value of vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium, and they can voluntarily declare the gram amount for other vitamins and minerals. The footnote is changing to better explain what percent of daily value means. It'll read, quote, the percent daily value tells you how much a nutrient in a serving of food contributes to a daily diet. 2,000 calories a day is used for, general nutrition advice. If you've seen on most of the food labels, or all the food labels, you'll see that it's based off a 2,000 calorie per day diet for your labeling purposes. Other things that they talk about reflects updated information about nutritional science. So added sugars in grams and a percent daily value will be included on the label. Scientific data shows that it is difficult to meet nutrient needs while staying with calorie limits if you consume more than 10% of your total daily calories from added sugar. And this is consistent with the 2015 to 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans. And those dietary guidelines get updated every 5 years, just so that we can, as we get more information about nutritional science, we can make updates to food requirements and dietary guidelines for Americans and our intakes of specific nutrients and different types of foods. The list of nutrients that are required or permitted to be declared is being updated. Vitamin D and potassium will be required on the label. Calcium and iron will continue to be required, but vitamins A and C will actually no longer be required. But they can be included on a voluntary basis. I'm not sure why they did that. It's kind of interesting to me that they would say that some vitamins are need to be on there and some don't. Each vitamin and mineral plays different roles in the body, but they're all important. I think that removing some and just replacing them is kind of, it doesn't really make a difference. It doesn't really change very much. So I kind of wish that they had kept those on there. So hopefully food manufacturers will just keep that other information on there voluntarily. When we're talking about fats, it says, while continuing to require total fat, saturated fat, and trans fats on the label, calories from fat is being removed because research shows that type of fat is more important than the amount. This is something that I'm actually not I don't have a problem with. I think it's a decent idea because a lot of people are concerned about their dietary fat intake because of old science that's no longer nearly as applicable, where it related fats and cholesterol and things like that, had it more directly tied with heart disease and things like that. And we're actually, as newer science is coming out, we're realizing that that's actually not the case. And in fact, also in recent science, cholesterol has been kind of pretty much removed as putting a limit on your daily cholesterol intake. That has been the previous dietary guidelines for cholesterol intake, which was a limit of 300 milligrams per day, has actually been removed. So you feel free to start consuming more cholesterol. It actually has a direct correlation to increased strength, elevated testosterone levels, cell structure, and cell health. So there's actually quite a bit of good things that fats do for you, and even saturated fats. About a third of your diet should come from healthy saturated fats. A great source of that with a large amount of healthy medium chain triglycerides would be coconut oil. That's one of my favorites. I have coconut oil almost every day. So I'm glad to see that they're kind of taking away the seemingly demonizing statement of the how many calories are in this from fat, because it kind of scares people away and draws people more towards high sugar foods. And in my opinion, high sugar is a lot worse than high fat. Daily values of nutrients like sodium, dietary fiber, and vitamin D are being updated based on newer scientific evidence also from the Institute of Medicine and other reports such as the 2015 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee report, which was used in developing the 2015 to 2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. Daily values are reference amounts of nutrients to consume or not to exceed and are used to calculate the percent daily value that manufacturers include on the label. The percent daily value helps consumers understand the nutrition information in the context of a total daily diet. So that way when you're reading labels, you can understand, okay, here's what's in this and here's the percent of what I should be getting each day. So, I know that vitamins and minerals are healthy for me, but I don't really know what micrograms or milligrams or grams really equates to. And so the percent daily value just helps you understand that. The third thing that they kind of went over was updates, serving sizes, and labeling requirements for certain package sizes. This was interesting to me. What they said was, by law, serving sizes must be based on amounts of foods and beverages that people are actually eating, not what they should be eating. How much people eat and drink has changed since the previous serving size requirements were published in 1993. So, for example, the reference amount used to set a serving of ice cream was previously a half cup, but is changing to 2/3 cup. The reference amount used to set a serving of soda is changed from 8 ounces to 12 ounces. Kind of along these lines, I was kind of wondering why they were increasing serving size amounts. And at first, I was thinking, that's not good because we're teaching people to consume in larger serving amounts. But what I realized was when you have something that's labeled, it'll have something, with multiple servings labeled per package. So some people will buy a single package of a particular food item, and like, let's say ice cream, and it might actually have 2 or 3 servings in it, but you assume because it's in one package that that's just one serving and you're going to eat the whole thing. So it actually, even though it increases the serving amount, what it does is it brings more awareness to the fact that that serving size is going to be higher in calories, higher in all your macronutrients and those kind of things. So it's going to bring more awareness so you can identify what the real serving of that food actually is and what the impact is going to have on your diet. So you're not thinking by reading the label, because let's say this ice cream has 3 servings, you read the nutrition facts and you say, oh, this only has this many calories in here, I can eat this. Then you eat the whole thing. You actually had 3 times that amount. That's kind of where I think it's going to be beneficial by changing those package sizes. They continue on and say package size affects what people eat, so kind of what we just talked about. So for packages that are between 1 and 2 servings, such as 20-ounce sodas or a 15-ounce can of soup, the calories and other nutrients will be required to be labeled as 1 serving because people typically consume it in one sitting. So kind of what we were getting at. Looking at the new nutrition label itself, you can definitely see a difference compared to the old one. There's a lot larger, bolder type, showing you the servings per container, and the serving size is a larger font and more bold. Calories are significantly larger on this item. In fact, the second you look at the label, it's the first thing that stands out because it's the largest font on the entire label. The new added sugars, and this is something that I really am happy to see change, actually, because not only does it just show total sugars, it used to show total sugars in grams, and it also formerly did not have a % daily value. There wasn't one that was established, and there is some recommendations, and in the past it's been about 38 grams per day is kind of your limit for sugar intake, which many people exceed that. I would say, probably the majority of Americans who are not educated well enough in nutrition definitely overconsume on that. It's very easy to overconsume on that amount, but now you have below there, it includes added sugars, and it shows you your % daily value for added sugars. Now, it still doesn't have a percentage next to your total sugars, but I think that's definitely a step forward for sure, because it's going to bring a lot of awareness to the consumer understanding how many grams or what percentage of their daily intake is actually coming from sugar or from these individual food items. They'll get a much better idea, like, wow, this thing is actually really loaded with sugar. It might be low fat, but I'm consuming 50% or 20% or 75% of my daily sugar intake from these added sugars. Those are kind of the main major changes on the nutrition facts labels. And so kind of one other thing I wanted to talk about was in other recent news, beef retailers are now labeling mechanically tenderized beef. So beginning when I was reading about this last week, the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service started requiring meat processors to properly label beef products that have actually been mechanically tenderized, meaning that a machine has actually pounded the meat and or punctured the meat in a way so it's been tenderized previous to you actually consuming it. The new label also provides customers with cooking instructions for safe handling of these products. Beginning May 17th, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service started requiring meat processors to disclose a common practice known as mechanical tenderization and provide safe cooking instructions so that consumers know how to handle these products carefully. I think that's really important because, to be honest with you, I didn't even know my meat was being tenderized by a machine. But I'm not surprised, to be honest. So it's just one of those things that the way that food is processed and the way that food, where it starts and how it ends up on our table, there's so many different factors and so many different variables and things that may come in contact with your food that if you're really trying to be a healthy person, you really want to know kind of where your food is coming from, what it's coming in contact with. And I think this is a really a good step moving forward for educating consumers about the process of getting food into their grocery stores and eventually into your mouths and bellies. The last article that I thought was really interesting, I actually shared part of this recently on the Facebook forum. And if you're not a member of the forum, just go to facebook.com, sign in, and search for Metabolic Radio Private Forum so that you can join the conversation. But I found two kind of conflicting articles. So it's kind of the duality among folic acid research that's been coming out recently. On one hand, folic acid for moms may not be as effective as we thought, as some study authors stress women should still take the B vitamin before and during pregnancy. If you look on your nutrition facts labels, a lot of cereals and grains and flours are fortified with folic acid, but it hasn't really helped as much. Even just though those foods are fortified, it hasn't protected against the risk of certain birth defects, as a lot of experts may have thought in the past. And that's kind of what this new study is suggesting. In the late 1990s, health experts found that low folic acid blood levels were linked to both birth defects. So the U.S. Food and Drug Administration mandated that cereal and grain products be fortified with vitamin B. To measure just how effective that effort has been, investigators from the Stanford University School of Medicine analyzed 1.3 million births across 8 central California counties over 2 decades. Between 1989 and 2010, there was an average of about 88 cases of neural tube defects for every 100,000 births. But digging deeper, investigators found that the risk had already started to decline before 1997 fortification mandate. There was a risk drop of nearly 9 cases per 100,000 birds every year between 1989 and 1996 alone, said the researchers. And the downward trend actually slowed after fortification, dipping by 1.7 cases for every 100,000 birds annually between 1999 and 2010, the study authors also said. So, I mean, kind of the bottom line, the benefits of folic acid for the prevention of neural tube defects are well documented, is what they're saying. But pretty much they were saying that supplementation with folic acid, whether it's in fortified foods or you're taking, prenatals that have more folic acid in it, isn't necessarily always going to be helpful for the development of your child. And just because they started fortifying foods, they actually started to see a decline of those birth defects prior to the fortification of foods. So it may not actually have a direct correlation because of that. So, what was also interesting that I saw, and this was the article I shared recently on the forum, was I saw some research that suggested that over supplementation with folic acid actually may lead to much significantly higher risk in development of autism. So, some studies that have just recently come out suggest that too much folate in pregnant women increases risk for autism. Researchers say that while folate deficiency is bad, like we just talked about, for the developing fetus, excessive amounts could also be harmful. Women who plan on becoming pregnant are told they need enough of the nutrient folate to ensure proper neurodevelopment of their babies. But new research from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health suggests that there could be serious risks of having far too much of the same nutrient. And this is something that we see a lot with supplementation is people think, oh, I'm taking a health supplement, or I'm taking something that is a vitamin or mineral, so the more the better, because the more I get, the more healthy I'm going to be. And we know that there are certain upper level intakes and limits that we should place on certain vitamins and minerals because they can become toxic in the body. The researchers in this endeavor found that if a new mother has a very high level of folate right after giving birth, more than 4 times what is considered adequate, the risk that her child will develop an autism spectrum disorder doubles. Very high vitamin B12 levels in new moms are also potentially harmful, tripling the risk that her offspring will develop an autism spectrum disorder. If both levels are extremely high, the risk of that child developing the disorder increases by 17.6 times. Folate, a B vitamin, is found naturally in fruits, vegetables, while also there are synthetic versions of folic acid, and it's used in fortified cereals and breads like we just talked about. More research is kind of needed is what they're saying, but they're kind of looking at this and saying, this could be a contributing factor to why autism has dramatically increased over the years. And so it's just, in a roundabout way, what I kind of want to get the point I want to get across is that what we've talked about, Shane and I, in other episodes we've expressed on the podcast, is that supplements combined with other factors can be potentially harmful and even though you think you're being healthy when you take them, you got to be careful about what kind of supplementation you're actually putting in your body and all the different factors, whether you're pregnant, whether you're male, female, whether you're over-consuming or under-consuming, or you're mixing it with foods that are fortified or not. And there's just so many different combinations of things. You really need to do your due diligence when it comes to supplementation. So yeah, that's kind of what I had for this week in health and fitness. If you have questions or something that you want covered in the podcast, just hit me up, Taylor@metabolicradio.com. You can also ask me questions for our official Q&A episode by going to metabolicradio.com and clicking on the Q&A tab. But until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Shane and I hope you learned something new and exciting today about your own health and fitness. Head over to metabolicradio.com. There you'll find our bios and our results-driven programs that are designed to help teach you everything you need to know when it comes to getting real permanent results. You can also sign up for our newsletter to get free weekly updates. To chat with Shane or I, just email us at taylor@metabolicradio.com or shane@metabolicradio.com. We would love to hear from you. You can also join the conversation on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com and search for Metabolic Radio Private Forum. There you can request to join the group. We would love to add you to the conversation and answer your questions on the show. And hey, if you like our podcast, please help us grow our community by leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. We would really appreciate your help. Thanks again so much for all your support and your listenership. Now go out there and spread the good word of fitness.